Sometimes the kindness we receive comes back to us in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes a single act of compassion can echo across generations, touching lives we never even knew existed. Warren Fletcher sat alone in a diner booth, a struggling single father trying to stretch his last $10. A homeless woman approached his table, her clothes worn and dirty, her face tired beyond her years. She looked directly at him and whispered a name, her father's name. Warren froze. He had never met this woman before, yet she spoke as if she knew him. As tears filled her eyes, she explained that her late father had once helped Warren when he needed it most. Could this be real? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 4:30 in the morning, the same time it rang every weekday, the same time Warren Fletcher had been waking up for the past 3 years. He reached over and silenced it with practiced efficiency, careful not to let it ring long enough to disturb his daughter in the next room. The apartment was cold. He kept the heat low to save money, and Warren pulled on the same worn jeans and flannel shirt he'd laid out the night before. Every morning followed the same rhythm, the same careful choreography of a man trying to stretch limited resources across unlimited needs. The bathroom mirror showed a face that had aged faster than its 38 years warranted. Grey threaded through his dark hair at the temples. Lines creased the corners of his eyes. Worry lines, not laugh lines, though he tried to smile for Phoebe's sake. Warren splashed cold water on his face and moved quietly through the small 2-bedroom apartment, avoiding the floorboards that creaked. The place was nothing special, peeling paint in the corners, a persistent drip in the kitchen sink he couldn't afford to fix, windows that rattled when the wind picked up. But it was home. It was shelter. It was more than he'd had once, and he never took that for granted. In the kitchen, Warren started the coffee maker and began preparing breakfast. Oatmeal again. It was cheap, filling, and Phoebe didn't complain, though he knew she missed the variety they'd had before Linda died. Before the medical bills, before everything changed. He measured out the oats carefully, added water, a pinch of salt. While it cooked, he packed Phoebe's lunch. Peanut butter sandwich, an apple that was slightly bruised but still good, a handful of pretzels in a plastic bag he'd wash and reuse. He added a note on a torn piece of paper. "Have a great day, Phoebes. Love you more than all the stars." Dad! The notes were his ritual, something he'd started after Linda passed. His wife had always been the one who knew how to make ordinary moments special, how to turn a simple lunch into a reminder that someone cared. Warren wasn't as creative with his words, but he tried. Every day, a new note. Some days it was a joke. Some days just a simple "I love you." On the hardest days, when money was tightest and worry kept him awake, he wrote things like, "We're going to be okay," as much to convince himself as to reassure her. By 5:30, Warren had eaten his own breakfast, black coffee and a piece of toast, and was ready to wake Phoebe. He opened her bedroom door slowly, letting the hallway light spill in gradually. She was curled under a quilt that had belonged to her mother, her dark hair spread across the pillow. At 10 years old, Phoebe looked so much like Linda, it sometimes took Warren's breath away. The same delicate features, the same way her nose crinkled when she was thinking hard about something. "Morning, sweetheart," Warren said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Time to get up." Phoebe stirred, opened her eyes, and immediately smiled. That smile, the one thing that made every struggle worthwhile. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Oatmeal's ready when you are. I put extra brown sugar on it the way you like." She sat up, the quilt falling away. "You didn't have to do that. Brown sugar costs extra." Warren's heart twisted. 10 years old, and she was already thinking about costs, about sacrifices. That wasn't right. Children shouldn't have to carry those burdens. "Don't you worry about that," he said, reaching over to smooth her hair. "Your job is to be a kid and do well in school. My job is everything else. But Dad, no buts. No get dressed and come eat. Mrs. Kowalski will be here at 7 to walk you to the bus stop." Warren left her room, and returned to the kitchen, feeling the familiar weight settle on his chest. Mrs. Kowalski was a blessing, their elderly neighbor who had stepped in to help after Linda died. She watched Phoebe after school, made sure she had a snack, helped with homework. Warren paid her what he could, though it was never enough for what she did. Mrs. Kowalski always waved away his attempts to pay more, saying, "I raised 4 children. One more is no trouble. Besides, Phoebe keeps me young." Phoebe emerged 15 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a sweater that was getting too small. Warren made a mental note. She needed new clothes soon. Add it to the list of things he couldn't quite afford but would have to find a way to manage. She ate her oatmeal without complaint, chatting about a project due at school, a book she was reading, her friend Teresa's upcoming birthday party. "Can I go to the party?" Phoebe asked, watching his face carefully. "It's at the bowling alley. Teresa said it costs $15 for shoes and games and pizza. $15. Warren did the quick math in his head. He'd just paid rent, barely. The electric bill was due in a week. He had maybe $40 to last until Friday's paycheck. "When is it?" "Next Saturday." "We'll make it work," Warren said, even though he had no idea how. He'd pick up an extra shift, skip a few meals if he had to. Phoebe deserved normal childhood experiences, birthday parties, friends, fun. She'd already lost so much. They finished breakfast together, Phoebe talking while Warren listened, committing every detail to memory. These morning conversations were precious. By evening, he'd be exhausted from his factory shift, and they'd have less time together. She'd tell him about her day, while he heated up the dinner Mrs. Kowalski had helped her prepare. And then it would be homework, bath, bed, and the whole routine would start again. At 6:45, Mrs. Kowalski knocked on the door, 3 quick raps, her signature greeting. Warren opened it to find the 72-year-old woman bundled in a thick coat, her white hair perfectly styled, despite the early hour. "Good morning, dear," she said warmly. "Is our girl ready?" "Almost." "Phoebe, Mrs. Kowalski's here." Phoebe grabbed her backpack, an old one of Linda's that Warren had tried to make look less adult by adding patches and pins, and came bounding to the door. She hugged Warren tightly. "Love you, Dad. Love you more than all the stars," he replied, their ritual response. "Be good. Learn something amazing." "I always do," she grinned. And then she was gone, hand in hand with Mrs. Kowalski, chattering about the book she was reading. Warren closed the door and stood in the sudden silence of the empty apartment. This was the hardest part of every day, the moment after she left, when the weight of responsibility crashed down fully. He was all Phoebe had. If he failed, if he lost his job, if he couldn't make rent, if something happened to him, she had no one else. No grandparents, no aunts or uncles close by. Just him and the threadbare safety net he'd managed to construct through sheer determination. The diner was Warren's one weekly indulgence, a small act of self-care that probably qualified as foolish, given his financial situation, but he allowed it anyway. Every Tuesday morning, after his night shift ended at 6 a.m., he'd stop at Miller's Diner on Maple Street before heading home. He'd order the same thing, coffee and 2 eggs over easy with toast, and sit in the same corner booth where he could watch the sunrise through the large front windows. It cost $8 including tip, and it was worth every penny for the hour of peace it bought him. The diner was a relic from another era, all chrome and red vinyl, with a long counter where regulars perched on swivel stools and a row of booths along the windows. The smell of coffee and bacon grease hung permanently in the air, and the jukebox in the corner still played actual records if you fed it quarters. Gretchen had been the morning waitress for as long as Warren. Had been coming here, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a practical manner who never judged the worn-out men and women who shuffled in looking for cheap coffee and a warm place to sit. "Morning." "Warren," Gretchen said as he slid into his usual booth. She already had the coffee pot in hand. "The usual?" "Please," Warren said, managing a tired smile. He'd been up for 26 hours straight. His day shift at Anderson Manufacturing followed immediately by his evening cleaning shift at the office complex downtown. His body ached in that bone-deep way that comes from too much work and not enough rest. But the paycheck from both jobs would come Friday, and he'd be able to buy Phoebe new clothes and pay the electric bill. Gretchen poured his coffee and headed back to the kitchen to put in his order. Warren wrapped his hands around the warm mug and stared out the window. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for a moment he let himself simply exist without thinking about bills or responsibilities or the grinding machinery of poverty that seemed designed to keep people like him trapped forever. The diner was quiet this early. A couple of truck drivers sat at the counter, and an old man Warren recognized as a regular sat 3 booths down, methodically working through a stack of pancakes. The bell above the door chimed occasionally as people came and went, grabbing coffee to go before heading to their own jobs. Warren had just closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the warmth and relative quiet, when he heard the bell chime again. He didn't look up immediately. But something made the atmosphere in the diner shift, a subtle change in energy that pulled his attention. When he opened his eyes and glanced toward the door, he saw a woman standing just inside the entrance. She was perhaps in her early 30s, though it was hard to tell. Her clothes were filthy and mismatched, a too large men's coat over what looked like 2 or 3 layers of shirts, jeans that were torn and stained, shoes held together with duct tape. Her hair was long and tangled, her face smudged with dirt. She was clearly homeless, clearly struggling, and clearly uncertain whether she should be here. The other patrons noticed her too. Warren watched as the truck drivers at the counter glanced over, then quickly looked away. The old man with the pancakes shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It was a familiar reaction, the way people looked at the homeless, a mixture of discomfort, pity, and a desire to not engage, to not see, to not acknowledge. Warren understood it. He'd been on the receiving end of those looks once. Gretchen came out from behind the counter, her expression professional but firm. "Miss, I'm sorry, but if you're not ordering, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The woman didn't seem to hear her. Her eyes were scanning the diner, searching for something or someone. When her gaze landed on Warren, she froze. Her eyes went wide, and something like recognition flashed across her face. She took a hesitant step forward. "Miss," Gretchen said again, more firmly. "I really need you to—" "Mr. Fletcher," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was looking directly at Warren now, trembling slightly. "Warren Fletcher?" Warren felt ice slide down his spine. He didn't know this woman. He'd never seen her before in his life. How did she know his name? "Do I know you?" he asked carefully, his mind racing through possibilities. A former co-worker, someone from the factory. But no, he would remember. The woman took another step closer, moving toward his booth with slow, deliberate movements, as if approaching a skittish animal. Her eyes were filled with tears now, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion. "You knew my father," she said. Kenneth Brennan. The name hit Warren like a physical blow. Kenneth Brennan. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in nearly 20 years, but the moment she said it, memories came flooding back with perfect clarity. Kenneth's face, weathered but kind, always smiling. Kenneth's voice, patient and encouraging. Kenneth's hand on his shoulder, steady and reassuring, when Warren had nothing left to hold on to. Warren's coffee cup slipped slightly in his grip, and he had to set it down to keep from spilling it. "Kenneth," he breathed. "Kenneth Brennan," the woman nodded, tears spilling down her dirty cheeks. "My father. He talked about you. He kept track of you over the years. Her voice broke and she struggled to compose herself. The whole diner had gone quiet now, everyone watching this strange interaction unfold. Gretchen stood frozen, the coffee pot still in her hand, clearly uncertain what to do. Warren felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Kenneth Brennan. God, how long had it been? 20 years. 21? Back when Warren was 25 and his life had fallen completely apart. The memories came in fragments, sharp and painful. Living in his car after losing his job. Running out of money. The car being repossessed. Sleeping in shelters when he could get a bed. Sleeping on the streets when he couldn't. The shame of it, the crushing, soul-destroying shame of having nothing, being nothing. Watching people look through him as if he didn't exist. And then Kenneth Brennan, who worked at the community services office downtown, who'd found Warren sitting on the steps outside a shelter one freezing November morning. Kenneth, who'd stopped, sat down beside him and asked his name. Who'd listened, really listened, when Warren told his story. Who'd come back the next day with a bag of supplies and information about job training programs. Who'd helped Warren get his first real job in years, who'd vouched for him with employers, who'd given him money for work clothes and told him it was a loan, but never asked for it back. Kenneth had saved his life, literally. Warren had been days away from giving up completely when Kenneth appeared. And now this woman, this stranger, was standing in front of him claiming to be Kenneth's daughter. "I'm Nora," the woman said, her voice steadier now. "Nora Brennan. My father died 5 years ago. He left me a letter, and in it he mentioned you. He said if I ever met you, I should know you were a good man." A man worth knowing? Warren couldn't speak. His throat had closed up and tears were burning behind his eyes. Kenneth was dead. Somehow, that hit him harder than he would have expected. He'd never kept in touch with Kenneth after getting back on his feet. Had always meant to, had always felt guilty about it. But life had moved forward, and the years had slipped by. And now Kenneth was gone, and this was his daughter, standing here looking like Warren must have looked 20 years ago, desperate and lost, and hanging on by a thread. "I'm so sorry," Nora continued, wiping at her face with a grimy sleeve. "I didn't mean to bother you. I've been on the streets for 6 months now, and I saw you sitting here, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. That maybe Dad was right about you. That maybe you'd—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come over. I'll go." "Wait," Warren said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Please sit down." Nora looked at him uncertainly. "I don't have money for food." "I wasn't trying to—" "I'm buying," Warren said firmly. He looked up at Gretchen, who was still standing there with the coffee pot. "Can you bring another menu? And more coffee?" Gretchen hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. "Of course." Her expression had softened considerably. Nora slid into the booth across from Warren, moving carefully as if she might break something just by being there. She kept her hands in her lap, her eyes downcast, radiating the same shame Warren remembered feeling when he'd been in her position. The shame of being seen, of being vulnerable, of accepting help when you had nothing to offer in return. "Tell me about your father," Warren said gently. "Tell me about Kenneth." And so she did. As the sun rose fully outside the diner windows, as Gretchen brought food and coffee and quietly retreated to give them privacy, Nora told Warren about growing up as Kenneth's daughter, about how her mother had died when she was young, and Kenneth had raised her alone, about what a good father he'd been, patient and loving and always seeing the best in people, about how he'd spent his entire career helping others, working in social services for 30 years. She told him about Kenneth's sudden death, a massive heart attack at 62, gone before the ambulance arrived. And she told him, haltingly and with great difficulty, about what had happened after, about her grief spiraling into depression, about the man she'd met who'd introduced her to pills, about losing her job as a pediatric nurse, about losing her apartment, about losing everything until she ended up here, in this diner, searching for a stranger her father had mentioned in a letter. Warren listened to it all, seeing his own story reflected in hers, the descent that happens so quickly once it starts, the way everything can fall apart before you even realize what's happening. He watched her eat the eggs and toast Gretchen had brought, eating quickly, like someone who didn't know when the next meal might come. He saw the exhaustion in her face, the wear of 6 months on the street, and he saw Kenneth in her, the same kind eyes, the same gentle manner. Even beaten down as she was, "He saved my life," Warren said when she'd finished talking. "Your father. I've never forgotten that. I always meant to thank him properly, to tell him what a difference he made. He shook his head. Life got in the way. I got busy, and now it's too late." "It's not too late," Nora said softly. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a worn envelope, protected in a plastic bag. He knew. He always knew. She handed it across the table. Warren opened it carefully and pulled out a handwritten letter on yellowed paper. Kenneth's handwriting. He recognized it immediately. The letter was addressed to Nora, written in the practical, straightforward way Kenneth had always spoken. Most of it was personal, a father's words to his daughter. But near the end, Warren found his name. "If you ever meet Warren Fletcher," Kenneth had written, "know that he represents everything I believed in, that people can change, that everyone deserves a chance, that kindness matters. He was homeless when I met him, broken and ready to give up. Now he's a good man building a good life. If you ever need help, Nora, and you can't come to me, find Warren. He'll understand. He'll remember." Warren read the passage twice, his vision blurring with tears. Kenneth had believed in him that much, had trusted him that much, had known somehow that their paths would cross again. He looked up at Nora, this stranger who wasn't really a stranger at all, and made a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. "I can't promise much," Warren said. "I'm barely keeping my head above water myself. But your father gave me a second chance when I needed it most. The least I can do is try to help you." Nora's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I know you don't, but I'm offering anyway. Let me make some calls, see what resources are available. Can you meet me back here tomorrow? Same time?" She nodded, unable to speak. They exchanged phone numbers. Nora still had an old cell phone that barely held a charge, and Warren promised he'd start researching options today. As Nora stood to leave, she looked at him with an expression of such desperate hope it nearly broke his heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "Dad was right about you." After she left, Warren sat alone in the booth, Kenneth's letter still in his hand. The sun was fully up now, and the diner was filling with the breakfast crowd. Gretchen came by to refill his coffee, touching his shoulder gently as she passed. Warren looked down at the letter again, at Kenneth's words about second chances and kindness mattering. He thought about his own daughter, about the life he'd built from nothing, about how one person's compassion had changed everything for him. He couldn't save everyone, but maybe he could help one person. Maybe that's what Kenneth had known all along, that saving one person at a time is how you change the world. Warren folded the letter carefully and tucked it back in its envelope. He had calls to make, research to do, a plan to figure out. But first he needed to go home and sleep for a few hours. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he'd need all his strength to face them. As he stood to leave, dropping money on the table for Gretchen, Warren caught his reflection in the diner window. He looked tired, worn down by life. But there was something else there too, a spark of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Kenneth had given him a second chance. Now it was his turn to give one to someone else. Warren barely slept. He'd gone home after leaving the diner, set his alarm for noon, and collapsed into bed fully clothed. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to Nora's face, to Kenneth's letter, to the impossible weight of what he'd just promised. How could he help someone else when he was barely managing to help himself? When the alarm finally went off, he'd maybe gotten 2 hours of fitful rest. His body protested as he dragged himself out of bed, but there was no time to indulge exhaustion. He had research to do, calls to make, solutions to find before meeting Nora again tomorrow morning. Warren started with the basics. He pulled out the battered laptop he'd bought second-hand 3 years ago and began searching for homeless services in the city. The results were overwhelming and simultaneously discouraging. Shelter wait lists stretched for weeks. Transitional housing programs had strict requirements and limited spaces. Free meal programs existed, but were scattered across the city with inconsistent hours. The safety net everyone assumed existed turned out to be full of holes, large enough to swallow people whole. He made a list anyway, methodically documenting every resource he could find. Shelter addresses, phone numbers for social services, food banks, free clinics, job training programs. By the time Phoebe came home from school at 3:30, Warren had filled 4 pages in a notebook with information that felt both helpful and hopelessly inadequate. "Dad," Phoebe's voice called from the front door. "I'm home!" Warren closed the laptop and stood, stretching muscles that had stiffened from sitting hunched over for hours. "In the kitchen, sweetheart," Phoebe came bounding in, backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her face bright with the kind of energy only 10-year-olds seemed to possess after a full day of school. Mrs. Kowalski followed more slowly, carrying a covered dish that smelled like heaven. "I made extra stew," Mrs. Kowalski said, setting the dish on the counter. "I thought you two might enjoy it for dinner." "You're too good to us," Warren said, meaning it deeply. Without Mrs. Kowalski's help, he honestly didn't know how they'd manage. "Nonsense. It's just stew." But she smiled, pleased. "Phoebe, show your father what you got on your math test." Phoebe dug into her backpack and produced a paper marked with a bright red A+ at the top. 100%. Mrs. Rodriguez said, "I'm the only one who got them all right." Warren felt pride swell in his chest. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." He pulled her into a hug, kissing the top of her head. "Your mom would be proud too." "I know," Phoebe said softly. Then pulling back to look up at him, "Dad, you look tired. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just had a long shift last night." Mrs. Kowalski gave him a searching look but said nothing. She'd learned over the past 3 years to recognize when Warren needed space and when he needed help. "Well, I'll leave you two to your evening. Phoebe, remember to practice your spelling words." "I will. Thank you, Mrs. Kowalski." After she left, Warren heated up the stew while Phoebe did her homework at the kitchen table. The domestic routine was comforting. Phoebe's pencil scratching across paper, the warm smell of food, the late afternoon light filtering through the windows. For a moment, Warren could almost pretend everything was simple and manageable, but Phoebe was perceptive. As they ate dinner together, she kept glancing at him, with that concerned expression she'd developed after Linda died, the look of a child who'd learned too young that bad things happen and nothing is guaranteed. "Something happened yesterday," Phoebe said finally, setting down her spoon. "I can tell. You've been different since you came home." Warren considered lying, keeping it simple. But he'd always tried to be honest with Phoebe, age-appropriately honest at least. She deserved to know what was going on in their lives. "I met someone yesterday at the diner," Warren said carefully. "A woman who's going through a very hard time. She's homeless, and she knew a man who helped me a long time ago, before you were born. A man named Kenneth Brennan." Phoebe's eyes widened with interest. "You were homeless?" "For a little while, yes. It was before I met your mom, before I got the job at the factory. I was in a bad place, and Kenneth helped me get back on my feet. He gave me a chance when nobody else would, and this woman you met, she knows him. She's his daughter. Kenneth died a few years ago, and she's struggling now the way I struggled back then. She found me because her father mentioned me in a letter he left her." Phoebe absorbed this information with the serious expression she got when thinking through something complicated. "So you're going to help her? Like Kenneth helped you?" "I'm going to try," Warren said. "I don't know how much I can do, but I have to try something. Kenneth gave me more than just practical help. He gave me hope when I'd run out. Maybe I can do the same for his daughter. What's her name?" "Nora. Nora Brennan." Phoebe nodded slowly, then reached across the table to put her small hand on Warren's. "Mom always said that helping others makes us rich, even when we don't have money. She said we have kindness, and that matters more than anything." Warren felt his throat tighten. Linda had said exactly that multiple times. She'd been the most generous person he'd ever known, always finding ways to help neighbors or donate to causes, even when their own budget was stretched impossibly thin. After she died, Warren had been so focused on survival that he'd let that part of himself, the generous part Linda had nurtured, shrink down to almost nothing. "Your mom was right," Warren said quietly. "She was right about a lot of things." "Then you should help Nora," Phoebe said, with the absolute certainty of childhood. "If Kenneth helped you, and you can help his daughter, that's like the help keeps going and going, like ripples in water." Warren stared at his 10-year-old daughter, amazed as always by her wisdom. "Ripples in water. That's exactly right." That night, after Phoebe was asleep, Warren sat at the kitchen table and made phone calls. He started with the shelter hotline, navigating an automated system that eventually connected him to a tired-sounding woman who confirmed what he'd already learned online. 3-week waitlist minimum, longer for single women without children. He called the community services office where Kenneth had worked, but the number had been disconnected. The organization had apparently reorganized and moved. He spent 20 minutes online finding the new number, only to reach another automated system that told him office hours were 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. By 11 p.m., Warren had made progress, but not nearly enough. He had a list of resources, but no clear path forward. No magic solution. Just a collection of phone numbers and addresses that might or might not help someone in Nora's situation. He pulled out Kenneth's letter again, reading it by the dim kitchen light. He'll understand. He'll remember. Kenneth had trusted him to figure this out, to find a way. But what if he couldn't? What if the system was too broken, the resources too limited? What if all he could offer were empty promises? Warren thought about Nora eating those eggs at the diner, the desperate hope in her eyes when he'd offered to help. He thought about Kenneth sitting beside him on those shelter steps 20 years ago, refusing to walk away, even though he had every reason to. Kenneth hadn't had all the answers either. But he'd shown up. He'd tried. Maybe that was enough. Maybe showing up, trying, being present, maybe that mattered more than having perfect solutions. Warren looked at the clock. Nearly midnight. He had to be up at 4:30 for his shift. But before bed, he pulled out his wallet and looked at the bills inside. $43 until Friday's paycheck. He could give Nora some money tomorrow, at least buy her a few meals, maybe a night or two at a cheap motel. It wasn't a solution, but it was something. He counted out $20 and set it aside. It meant he'd have to be even more careful with his own spending this week, maybe skip a few meals. But he'd gone hungry before. He could do it again if it meant Nora had food. As Warren finally climbed into bed, exhausted beyond measure, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose beyond simple survival. He was terrified of failing, of not being enough, of letting down both Nora and Kenneth's memory. But beneath the fear was something else. Something that felt like hope taking root again after a long winter. Tomorrow, he'd meet Nora at the diner and share what he'd learned. It wouldn't be enough, but it would be a start. And sometimes, Warren thought as sleep finally pulled him under, a start is all anyone really needs. 3 days passed before Warren saw Nora again. She hadn't shown up at the diner that Tuesday as they'd planned, and Warren had spent the morning worried something terrible had happened. He'd left a message on the cell phone number she'd given him, but got no response. By Wednesday, he was checking the local news for reports of accidents or worse. By Thursday, he was driving through downtown during his lunch break, scanning the streets for any sign of her. Friday morning. Exhausted and worried, Warren sat in his usual booth at Miller's Diner, hoping against hope that Nora would appear. Gretchen brought his coffee without being asked, her expression sympathetic. "Still no word from your friend?" she asked quietly. Warren shook his head. "Nothing. Her phone must be dead, or maybe she lost it. Or maybe—" He didn't finish the sentence. The possibilities were too grim. "Give it time," Gretchen said. "The streets are unpredictable, but people are tougher than we think." Warren was halfway through his eggs when the diner door opened and Nora walked in. She looked worse than she had 3 days ago, if that was possible. Her clothes were even dirtier, and she had a fresh bruise on her cheekbone. But she was alive, and the relief Warren felt was overwhelming. "Nora," he said, standing up as she approached. "I was worried sick. Are you okay?" She slid into the booth, wincing slightly as if her body hurt. "I'm sorry. My phone died and it's been a rough few days. Someone stole my blanket, and it's been so cold at night." She touched the bruise on her face self-consciously. "I had to leave my usual spot. Some guys were causing trouble, and I had to find somewhere else to sleep." Warren felt anger rise in his chest, not at her, but at a world that let this happen to people. "Have you eaten?" "Not since yesterday afternoon. The meal program ran out of food before I got to the front of the line." Warren waved Gretchen over and ordered a full breakfast: eggs, bacon, pancakes, orange juice. When Gretchen left, he pushed the $20 he'd set aside across the table. "Take this. It's not much, but—" "I can't," Nora said immediately, pushing it back. "You've already done so much, and I know you're struggling too. I saw the way you counted your money the other day." "Take it," Warren insisted, pushing it back toward her. "Please, I've been where you are. I know what it's like to be hungry and cold and feel like the world has forgotten you. Kenneth didn't forget me, and I'm not going to forget you." Nora's eyes filled with tears, but she took the money, folding it carefully and tucking it into her coat pocket. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." "I do know," Warren said gently. "That's why I'm doing it." As Nora ate, slowly this time, as if savoring every bite, Warren shared what he'd learned about resources. The shelter waitlist, the food programs, the social services that might be able to help. He watched her face fall as he outlined the obstacles, the bureaucracy, the endless waiting that seemed designed to break people's spirits. 3 weeks, she said when he mentioned the shelter waitlist. "I don't know if I can last 3 more weeks out there. It's getting colder, and the places I can sleep safely are running out." Warren had been thinking about this problem for 3 days straight, turning it over in his mind during every spare moment. The solution he'd arrived at was probably foolish, possibly dangerous, and definitely beyond what he should reasonably do for someone he'd just met. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Kenneth would have done something similar. "I have a storage unit," Warren said carefully. "It's not much. Just a 10 by 10 concrete space where I keep some of my wife's things that I couldn't bear to get rid of. But it has a door that locks and it's shelter. You could stay there temporarily, just until the shelter spot opens up." Nora stared at him. "You'd let me stay in your storage unit?" "It's not ideal," Warren admitted. "There's no heat, no running water, but it's dry and it's safer than the streets. I can bring you blankets, a sleeping bag. It's only for 3 weeks. Warren, that's..." Nora's voice broke. "That's incredibly generous. But I can't ask you to..." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Warren leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Kenneth gave me a chance when I had nothing. He saw me as a human being when everyone else looked through me like I was invisible. I can't do much, but I can do this. Please let me do this." Nora wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll take the help and use these 3 weeks to get yourself together. Apply for jobs, get cleaned up, prepare for when that shelter spot opens." "Yes," Nora whispered. "Yes, okay. Thank you." After breakfast, Warren drove Nora to the storage facility on the edge of town. The place was a sprawling complex of identical orange units, and Warren's was in the back corner. He unlocked the rolling door and pulled it up, revealing a space packed with boxes and furniture covered in sheets, remnants of Linda's life that he hadn't been able to let go. "I'll clear some space," Warren said, "already moving boxes to create room for a person to sleep. And I'll bring supplies this afternoon. Blankets, a sleeping bag, some food that doesn't need cooking. There's a gas station 2 blocks from here with bathrooms you can use." Nora stood in the doorway, looking around at the space with an expression Warren couldn't quite read. "These are your wife's things?" "Yes. She passed away 3 years ago, cancer." "I'm so sorry." Nora stepped inside, running her hand gently over a covered chair. "She must have been special." "She was," Warren said simply. "She taught me that helping others matters more than anything else. Even when we barely had enough for ourselves, she always found ways to give. I think she'd approve of this." They worked together for the next hour, organizing the space. Warren stacked boxes along one wall, creating a clear area where Nora could set up a makeshift bed. He showed her how to lock the unit from the inside and gave her the spare key he'd always kept on his keychain. "I'll come by every day," Warren promised. "Bring food, check on you, help however I can. And Nora..." He paused, making sure she was looking at him. "This is temporary. 3 weeks, and then you move to the shelter program. From there, we work on getting you into transitional housing, helping you get your nursing license back, rebuilding your life. This storage unit isn't the end goal. It's just a stepping stone." "I understand," Nora said. "And Warren?" "I've been clean for 4 months now. I go to AA meetings when I can find them. I'm not the person I was 2 years ago. I'm fighting my way back." Warren saw the determination in her eyes and believed her. "I know you are. Kenneth knew it too. That's why he trusted you'd find your way." That afternoon, Warren went to the discount store and spent money he couldn't afford on supplies. A warm sleeping bag, extra blankets, bottled water. Non-perishable food, a flashlight, batteries. He also bought basic hygiene supplies, soap, shampoo, toothpaste, deodorant. The total came to $73, which left him with almost nothing until his paycheck came through later that day. When he returned to the storage unit, Nora had cleaned the space as best she could. She'd organized the boxes neatly, swept the concrete floor with a makeshift broom made from a stick and some cloth, and even arranged Linda's furniture in a way that created a small living area. It looked almost cozy, despite being a concrete box. "This is amazing," Nora said when Warren showed her the supplies. She unpacked everything carefully, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't tell you how much this means. For the first time in 6 months, I feel like maybe I can survive this." "You can," Warren said firmly. "You will. And when you're back on your feet, you'll help someone else the way I'm helping you." That's how Kenneth's legacy continues. They talked for another hour, and Nora shared more of her story. She'd been a good nurse, loved her job working with children. She'd had friends, a nice apartment, a normal life. But grief over losing Kenneth had pulled her under, and the pills had seemed like a solution until they became the problem. She'd lost everything systematically. First her job when she failed a drug test. Then her apartment when she couldn't pay rent. Then her friends when she became too difficult to be around. Then her dignity when she ended up on the streets. "But I'm clawing my way back," Nora said. "One day at a time, like they say in the meetings. I haven't used in 4 months. I attend meetings whenever I can find them. I'm trying." Warren saw Kenneth in her, the same stubborn determination, the same refusal to give up despite overwhelming odds. "Your father would be proud of you." "I hope so," Nora said quietly. "I hope wherever he is, he knows I'm trying to be the person he believed I could be." As Warren drove home that evening, he felt the weight of what he'd committed to. He'd essentially added another person to his already strained resources. He'd have to be more careful with money, pick up extra shifts if possible, maybe skip meals to make sure both Phoebe and Nora had enough. It was going to be hard, maybe impossible, but when he pulled into his apartment parking lot and saw the light on in his window where Phoebe waited for him, Warren felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose, connection, the sense that his life meant something beyond just surviving day to day. Kenneth had given him that feeling 20 years ago. Now he was passing it forward to Kenneth's daughter, and somehow that felt like exactly what he was supposed to be doing. 2 weeks passed, and Warren fell into a rhythm that pushed him to the edge of his physical and financial limits. Every morning after his night shift, he'd stop by the storage unit with breakfast for Nora, usually something simple from the convenience store, coffee and a breakfast sandwich. They'd talk for 20 minutes, and Warren would check that she had what she needed before heading home to sleep for a few hours. Then he'd wake up, get Phoebe from school, help with homework, make dinner, and head back out for his evening cleaning shift. The cycle was grinding him down, but Nora was making progress, and that kept him going. She'd cleaned herself up considerably. The gas station attendant had taken pity on her and started letting her use the employee bathroom to shower every few days. Her clothes were still worn, but cleaner, and she'd managed to get a few items from the thrift store using the money Warren had given her. More importantly, she'd been applying for jobs steadily. Warren had helped her update her resume on his laptop, highlighting her nursing experience while carefully explaining the gap in employment as personal leave for family matters. But the strain was showing on Warren. 2 weeks of minimal sleep and skipped meals had left him gaunt and exhausted. At work, his supervisor had noticed him nodding off during a safety briefing and pulled him aside. "Fletcher, this is your second warning," the supervisor said, his tone more concerned than angry. "I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but you need to get it together. One more incident, and I'll have no choice but to let you go. We can't have people falling asleep around heavy machinery." Warren had apologized profusely, promised it wouldn't happen again, and spent the rest of his shift running on pure anxiety. He couldn't lose this job. It was the one with health insurance, the one that paid enough to cover rent. Losing it would mean losing everything. That evening, coming home between shifts, Warren found Mrs. Kowalski waiting in the hallway outside his apartment. Her expression was serious, and Warren's stomach dropped. Something had happened with Phoebe. "She's fine physically," Mrs. Kowalski said before he could ask. "But Warren, we need to talk. Can I come in?" They sat at the kitchen table, and Mrs. Kowalski explained what she'd noticed over the past 2 weeks. Phoebe falling asleep during homework. Her lunchbox coming home with food still in it. She'd been giving away half her lunch to other kids, claiming she wasn't hungry. Her teacher had called, concerned that Phoebe's grades were slipping and she seemed distracted in class. "She told me she wants to help you save money," Mrs. Kowalski said gently. "She knows something's going on, Warren. She's scared, and she's trying to help in the only way she knows how." Warren dropped his head into his hands. He'd been so focused on helping Nora that he hadn't seen what was happening with his own daughter. Phoebe was sacrificing, suffering, because of choices he'd made. The guilt was overwhelming. "I'm trying to help someone," Warren said quietly. "Someone who needs it desperately. But maybe I've gone too far. Maybe I can't afford to help anyone when I can barely help myself." Mrs. Kowalski reached across the table and took his hand. "You have a good heart, Warren, but your first responsibility is to that little girl in there. She's already lost her mother. She can't lose you too, either to exhaustion or to worry." Warren knew she was right. That night, after Mrs. Kowalski left, he sat with Phoebe and had the conversation he should have had weeks ago. He explained more fully about Nora, about Kenneth, about why he felt compelled to help. And then he asked Phoebe how she was really feeling about everything. "I'm scared, Dad," Phoebe admitted, tears running down her face. "You're always tired now. You barely eat. What if you get sick like Mom did? What if something happens to you?" Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she cried. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise. And you're right, I haven't been taking good enough care of myself. I'm going to do better, but what about Nora? Are you going to stop helping her?" Warren thought about that carefully. "No, I'm not going to stop. But I'm going to find a better balance. Helping others is important, but so is taking care of us. Your mom used to say we can't pour from an empty cup. I've been trying to pour when my cup is bone dry." The next morning, Warren had an honest conversation with Nora. He explained that he needed to pull back slightly, that he was stretching himself too thin. To his relief, Nora understood completely. "I've been worried about you," she admitted. "You look exhausted. I never wanted you to hurt yourself helping me." "I'm not stopping," Warren assured her. "But I can't come by every single day. Maybe every other day instead. And I need to be more careful about money. I'll still help, but I have to make sure Phoebe and I are okay first." "Of course," Nora said. "Your daughter comes first, always. Warren, you've already given me so much. You've given me hope, shelter, a chance to get back on my feet. That's more than I had any right to expect." They worked out a new arrangement. Warren would check in 3 times a week instead of daily, and he'd help Nora connect with more community resources so she wasn't solely dependent on him. There was a church nearby that served meals twice a week. The library had free computer access, so she could apply for jobs without using Warren's laptop. Small adjustments that would ease the burden on both of them. But that afternoon, Warren received news that made everything more complicated. His landlord left a message saying rent was going up by $50 starting next month. $50 might not sound like much, but in Warren's budget it was catastrophic. He sat at the kitchen table with his bills spread out, trying to make the numbers work, and couldn't find a solution. He was short. Even working both jobs, even cutting every possible expense, he was going to be short. Warren looked at Linda's wedding ring, sitting in a small box on the shelf. He'd been keeping it for Phoebe, planning to give it to her when she got older. But now, facing the reality of his finances, he realized what he had to do. The next day, Warren drove to the pawn shop downtown. The man behind the counter examined the ring through a jeweler's loupe, made an offer. $300. It wasn't much. The ring was small, the diamond modest, but it would cover the gap between what Warren had and what he needed to survive the next few months. Warren accepted the offer, his hands shaking as he signed the paperwork. He pocketed the cash and walked out feeling like he'd betrayed Linda's memory, betrayed the future he'd imagined for Phoebe. But what choice did he have? They needed to eat. They needed to keep their home. That evening, Warren sat in his apartment alone. Phoebe was at a friend's house for a rare sleepover, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of everything. He was exhausted. He was broke. He'd pawned his wife's ring. He was helping a stranger while his own daughter was suffering. What was he doing? Was any of this worth it? His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Nora. "Just wanted you to know I got a call back for an interview at the grocery store. Part-time stocking position. It's because of the resume you helped me write. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Warren stared at the message for a long time. A job interview. Real progress. Nora was fighting her way back, and his help, even with all its costs, had made a difference. Maybe that mattered. Maybe that was enough. He texted back, "That's wonderful news. You're going to do great." Then he sat in the quiet apartment, looking at the empty spot on the shelf where Linda's ring had been, and whispered, "I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope you'd understand." The next morning brought another challenge. Warren arrived at the storage unit to find Nora sitting outside, looking shaken. Someone had tried to break in during the night. The lock was damaged, and although nothing had been stolen, Nora had scared them off by yelling. It was clear the storage unit wasn't as safe as they'd hoped. "I can't stay here," Nora said. "If they come back with more people, I don't know what might happen." Warren examined the damaged lock, his mind racing. The shelter spot was still a week away. Where could she go? What could he do? He couldn't bring her to his apartment. His lease didn't allow it, and he couldn't risk eviction. But he couldn't leave her on the streets either. "Let me think," Warren said. "There has to be a solution. Give me until tonight." As he drove to work, Warren's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered, expecting a telemarketer. "Mr. Fletcher, my name is Bernard Whitestone. I'm an attorney. I've been trying to reach you for quite some time. It's regarding the estate of Kenneth Brennan." Warren nearly swerved off the road. "Kenneth's estate? I don't understand. Could we meet?" the lawyer asked. "I have some information I believe you'll find quite significant. It concerns a bequest Mr. Brennan left specifically for you." Warren's hands gripped the steering wheel. "A bequest?" Kenneth had left him something. "After all these years?" "Yes," Warren said, his voice barely steady. "Yes, we can meet when?" Warren sat in the lawyer's office 3 days later, Nora beside him, both of them nervous and confused about why they'd been summoned. Bernard Whitestone was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that reminded Warren slightly of Kenneth himself. The office was modest but professional, with law books lining the walls and a large wooden desk covered in neat stacks of papers. "Thank you both for coming," Bernard said, gesturing for them to sit. "I know this must seem mysterious. I've been trying to locate you, Mr. Fletcher, for nearly 5 years now. You've moved several times, and without a current address it's been quite challenging." 5 years, Warren said. "Since Kenneth died?" "Precisely. Kenneth Brennan was a client of mine for many years. He was a meticulous man, very organized about his affairs. When he learned about his heart condition, he'd had a mild heart attack 2 years before the fatal one. He updated his will and left very specific instructions." Bernard opened a folder on his desk. "Mr. Fletcher, Kenneth left a trust fund specifically designated for you." Warren felt the room tilt. "A trust fund? That's impossible. I only knew Kenneth briefly 20 years ago. Why would he? Kenneth kept track of people he'd helped throughout his career," Bernard explained. "Not in an intrusive way, but he liked to know how they were doing. He followed your progress over the years, saw that you'd gotten married, had a daughter, built a stable life. He was very proud of you, Mr. Fletcher. He considered you proof that his life's work mattered." Warren's eyes filled with tears. "Kenneth had been watching over him all this time, and he'd never known. The trust is $25,000, Bernard continued. "Kenneth's instructions were clear. It's meant to help you with whatever you need. Education for your daughter, emergency expenses, whatever would improve your life. $25,000. The number was so large Warren couldn't process it. That was more money than he'd ever had at once in his entire life. That was security. That was breathing room. That was everything. I can't—" Warren started, his voice breaking. "That's too much. I don't deserve. Kenneth believed you did, Bernard said gently. And there's more. He turned to Nora. Ms. Brennan, your father left specific items for you as well, including a letter he wrote knowing you might read it after his death. Would you like to see it now? Nora nodded, unable to speak. Bernard handed her an envelope, and with shaking hands, she opened it and began to read. Warren watched as tears streamed down her face, her lips moving silently as she absorbed her father's words. When she finished, she looked up at Bernard. He forgave me, she whispered, for everything. He said he never stopped believing in me. Your father was a remarkable man, Bernard said. He understood human struggle better than anyone I've ever met. He knew people make mistakes, and he never gave up on anyone he cared about. Nora handed the letter to Warren, and he read it with growing emotion. Kenneth's words were full of love and wisdom, expressing forgiveness for Nora's struggles and faith in her eventual recovery. But the part that struck Warren most was near the end. If you ever meet Warren Fletcher, know that he represents everything I believed in, that people can change, that everyone deserves a chance, that kindness matters. He was homeless when I met him, broken and ready to give up. Now he's a good man building a good life. If you ever need help, Nora, and you can't come to me, find Warren. He'll understand. He'll remember. Warren looked at Bernard. He wanted us to meet. This wasn't coincidence, he planned it. I believe so, Bernard said. Kenneth had a way of seeing connections others missed. He trusted that if you two found each other, you'd help each other heal. Bernard explained more about the estate. Kenneth had left most of his modest savings to Nora, of course, but the specific trust for Warren was separate, set aside years before Kenneth's death. He'd been saving it slowly, putting away small amounts, specifically for Warren. There's one more thing, Bernard said. Kenneth left a video message. He recorded it 6 months before he died. Would you like to see it? Warren and Nora both nodded. Bernard set up a laptop and pressed play. Kenneth's face appeared on screen, older than Warren remembered, grayer, but with the same warm eyes and gentle smile. He was sitting in what looked like his home office, wearing a cardigan, looking directly at the camera. Warren, Kenneth said, and hearing that voice again after so many years made Warren's chest tighten. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and Bernard has finally tracked you down. First, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You took the chance I offered and built something beautiful, a family, a life, a future. That's all I ever wanted for the people I helped. You didn't just survive, Warren. You thrived. And that matters more than you know. Kenneth paused, his expression becoming more serious. I'm leaving you some money because I want you to have security, to not struggle the way you did when we met. But more than that, I'm leaving you something more important, my daughter. Not literally, of course, but spiritually. Nora is struggling now, the way you struggled once. She's lost her way, and I won't be there to help her find it back. I'm trusting you, Warren, to be there for her if your paths cross. Help her the way I helped you. Believe in her the way I believed in you. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving. Not money, but compassion passed forward. The video shifted, and Kenneth addressed Nora directly. My beautiful girl, if you're hearing this, I want you to know I never stopped loving you. Not when you were using, not when you pushed me away, not ever. Addiction is a disease, not a moral failure. I don't blame you for anything. I only hope you found your way to recovery and that Warren has been the friend I knew he would be. You two are more alike than you might realize. Take care of each other. Your family now, whether you know it or not. Kenneth looked back at the camera, speaking to both of them. I spent my life believing that kindness creates ripples, that helping one person can change everything. Warren, you were one of my ripples. Nora, you're my daughter, my heart. Together, I believe you can create more ripples, help more people, keep this legacy going. Don't mourn me too long. Just live well, love deeply, and remember, everyone deserves a second chance. The video ended. Warren and Nora sat in silence, tears running down both their faces. Bernard quietly left the room to give them privacy. He knew, Nora said finally. He knew I'd end up homeless. He knew I'd need help, and he set this up, all of it, to make sure we'd find each other. He believed in both of us, Warren said, his voice thick with emotion. Even when we didn't believe in ourselves. They sat together for a long time, processing what they'd learned. Kenneth hadn't just helped them individually. He'd created a connection that transcended death, bringing two broken people together so they could heal each other. When Bernard returned, they discussed the practical details. The trust money would be available within a few days, once the paperwork was processed. Warren immediately thought of everything it meant. He could pay off Linda's medical debt that still hung over him, could build real savings, could give Phoebe a secure future. He could quit his second job and actually sleep. He could breathe, but looking at Nora, he made a decision. "I want to split it," he said. "Half for me, half for Nora." "Warren, no," Nora started, but he held up his hand. "Kenneth left this money for me, yes. But he left it knowing I'd meet you, knowing we'd help each other. 12,500 each. For you, it means you can get a real apartment, buy professional clothes, fully focus on getting your nursing license reinstated. For me, it means security and rest. This is what Kenneth wanted, for both of us to thrive," Nora argued, but Warren was firm. Bernard, watching them, smiled slightly. "Kenneth would approve of this," he said. This is exactly the kind of generosity he hoped to inspire. They left the lawyer's office in a daze, walking out into afternoon sunshine that seemed brighter than it had in years. Warren felt lighter than he had since Linda died, not just because of the money, though that mattered, but because of what it represented. Kenneth had never forgotten him. Kenneth had believed in him enough to plan for his future, and Kenneth had trusted him to carry on his legacy of compassion. "What do we do now?" Nora asked as they stood on the sidewalk. Warren thought about Phoebe, about the pawn shop where Linda's ring waited, about the bills piled on his kitchen table. He thought about Nora's job interview, about the shelter spot that would open in 4 days, about the life she was fighting to rebuild. "Now," Warren said, "we honor Kenneth's memory. We use this gift to build better lives. And then we figure out how to help others the way he helped us." Nora nodded, wiping tears from her face. "He gave us more than money. He gave us each other. He gave us hope." "That was always Kenneth's real gift," Warren agreed. "The money helps, but the hope, that's what saves people." They parted ways, with plans to meet the next day to discuss next steps. Warren drove straight to the pawnshop and retrieved Linda's ring. The relief he felt holding it again was overwhelming. Phoebe would have this piece of her mother after all. That evening, Warren sat Phoebe down and told her everything, about Kenneth, about the money, about how sometimes the universe rewards people who try to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Phoebe listened with wide eyes, and when he finished, she threw her arms around him. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said. "Mom would be proud too." Warren held his daughter close, feeling pieces of himself that had been broken for years, finally starting to mend. Kenneth's gift wasn't just financial, it was permission to stop merely surviving and start truly living again. The money changed everything, yet in the most important ways, it changed nothing at all. Within a week, Warren had paid off the medical debt that had haunted him for 3 years. The relief was physical, like a weight lifting from his shoulders he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. He quit his cleaning job, which meant actual sleep for the first time in years. He bought Phoebe new clothes and took her to a real restaurant, not fast food, where they sat and talked for 2 hours like they used to do before Linda died. Nora moved into a small studio apartment in a safe neighborhood. Clean and bright with an actual bed and kitchen, she bought professional clothes and prepared obsessively for her job interview at the grocery store. When she got the position, part-time but with potential for more hours, she called Warren immediately, her voice shaking with joy. "This is real," she kept saying. "This is actually happening. I'm coming back." But the real transformation happened more quietly, in the space between the dramatic moments. Warren and Nora met twice a week at Miller's Diner, and their conversations evolved from practical planning to deeper discussions about life, loss, and legacy. They'd both been saved by Kenneth's kindness, and they both felt the weight of that gift, the responsibility to do something meaningful with it. It was during one of these conversations, 3 weeks after meeting with Bernard, that Nora showed Warren something she'd found while sorting through boxes of her father's belongings that the lawyer had returned to her. "I found his old journals," Nora said, sliding a worn leather notebook across the table. "From his years in social work. Warren, you need to read this." Warren opened the journal carefully, the pages yellowed with age. The entries were dated, methodical notes about the people Kenneth had helped. He found his own name easily. Kenneth had written about their first meeting in detail. November 12th, Kenneth had written. "Met young man today outside the shelter. Warren Fletcher, age 25. Bright eyes despite the despair. So much potential buried under circumstances. He reminds me of myself at that age, before I found my calling. I must help him see what I see. Tomorrow, I'll bring him information about job training programs. Something tells me he's worth the investment." Warren's eyes blurred with tears. He'd never known Kenneth had seen so much in him from that very first day. He flipped forward through the pages, finding more entries about himself over the following months, tracking his progress with obvious pride. But then he found entries about Nora, from years later. Kenneth's handwriting was shakier here, the words heavier with emotion. "Nora is using again. I can see it in her eyes, in the way she won't look at me. I failed her somehow, failed to give her the tools to cope with her mother's death, with life's hardships. I keep thinking about Warren, about how intervention at the right moment saved him. But Nora won't let me help. She pushes me away. I'm losing my daughter, and I don't know how to save her." Warren looked up at Nora, who was crying quietly. "He never told me he felt that way," she said. "He never blamed me to my face, but I always assumed he did. Reading this, knowing he blamed himself, it breaks my heart. He loved you so much," Warren said gently. "You can feel it in every word." Nora wiped her eyes and pointed to a specific page. "Read that entry. From 1 month before he died." Warren found the entry and began reading. His hands started trembling before he finished the first paragraph. "My heart is failing," Kenneth had written. "The doctors say I might have a year, maybe less. I'm getting my affairs in order, making plans. I've set aside money for Warren. He doesn't know it, but I've been following his progress all these years. He married a good woman, had a daughter, built a life. He proved everything I believed about second chances. I want to give him security, not because he needs saving again, but because good people deserve support. As for Nora, I'm heartbroken that I won't be here to see her recovery, because I know she will recover. She's stronger than she knows, stronger than I was, but she'll need help, and I won't be there to give it. Last night I had a dream, Nora and Warren meeting somehow, helping each other. It seems so real, so right. They're more similar than either knows. Both fighters, both wounded, both deserving of second chances. I've revised my will to mention Warren in Nora's letter. If she ends up homeless, if she falls as far as she can fall, maybe she'll remember his name. Maybe she'll seek him out. And maybe, just maybe, they'll save each other the way I can't save either of them anymore. It's a long shot, a hope built on faith rather than logic. But my whole life has been about believing in long shots. Why stop now? Warren set the journal down, his mind reeling. Kenneth hadn't just hoped they'd meet. He'd deliberately planted the seed, mentioned Warren's name in Nora's letter specifically so she'd seek him out if she needed help. This wasn't coincidence or fate. This was Kenneth orchestrating from beyond the grave, setting up a connection that would save both of them. He planned all of it, Warren said, his voice full of wonder. Every piece. The trust fund for me, the letter mentioning my name to you, the video message to both of us. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers, Nora said with a sad smile. Always thinking 3 steps ahead, always seeing connections others missed. They sat in silence for a moment, processing the depth of Kenneth's foresight. Then Nora turned to another page in the journal, one marked with a ribbon. There's more, she said. Read his last entry. He wrote it the day before he died. Warren found the marked page and read Kenneth's final written words. If you're reading this, Nora, it means I'm gone. I hope you found Warren. I hope he helped you. I hope you helped him too, because healing is never one-directional. It's a circle, a continuous exchange of hope and support. My greatest dream is that you two don't just help each other, but create something larger. I spent 30 years helping people one at a time, and it was good work, meaningful work. But imagine if everyone I helped went on to help others. Imagine the ripples spreading outward infinitely. Warren, Nora, you could do this. You could take what I started and expand it. Not a big organization with bureaucracy and red tape, but something simple. Human connection. One person helping another, then that person helping someone else. A chain of compassion that never breaks. I'm leaving you both money, yes, but I'm leaving you something more valuable, each other and a mission. Don't let my work die with me. Please keep it alive by passing it forward. Help one person, then help them help another. That's how you honor my memory. That's how you change the world. One connection, one act of kindness at a time. I love you both. I believe in you both. Now believe in each other, and believe in the power of human compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. Warren closed the journal, unable to speak. Gretchen refilled their coffee cups without comment, sensing the weight of the moment. Outside the diner windows, people walked past, going about their ordinary lives, unaware that inside this booth, two people were having their purpose crystallized. He gave us a mission, Nora said finally. Not just money, not just connection, but a reason to keep living. A way to make sense of everything we've been through. Warren thought about his journey. From homeless to housed, from broken to healing, from alone to connected. He thought about Phoebe and how she'd witnessed his struggle and his choice to help Nora, despite having so little himself. He thought about Linda's philosophy that kindness matters more than wealth, and Kenneth's belief that everyone deserves a second chance. We should do it, Warren said, the certainty in his voice surprising even himself. We should create something in Kenneth's name. A foundation or a program or just something. A way to help people the way he helped us. How? Nora asked. We're not social workers. We don't have training or resources, or we have something better, Warren interrupted. We have experience. We know what it's like to be on the bottom, to need help, to fight our way back. We know what works because we've lived it. And we have each other. Kenneth knew that would be enough. Nora stared at him, and Warren could see the idea taking root in her mind. The Kenneth Brennan Second Chance Foundation, she said slowly. We could start small. Help one person at a time, the way Dad did. Connect people with resources. Advocate for them. Believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. Exactly, Warren said, feeling excitement build for the first time in years. We're not replacing your father's work. We're continuing it, expanding it, making sure his legacy doesn't die. They spent the next 2 hours sketching out ideas on napkins. They'd start modestly, identify one person who needed help, focus all their energy on that person, help them get stable. Then that person could help the next, and so on. Not a big organization, at least not yet. Just human beings helping other. Human beings, creating ripples the way Kenneth had described. As Warren drove home that evening, he felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope mixed with purpose, excitement mixed with determination. Kenneth had given them more than money or even connection. He'd given them a reason to wake up every morning, a mission that transformed their suffering into meaning. When he walked into his apartment, Phoebe looked up from her homework with a smile. You look happy, Dad. Really happy. Not just pretend happy. Warren pulled her into a hug. I am happy, sweetheart. I think I finally figured out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Helping people like you helped Nora. Exactly like that. But bigger. Your mom always said helping others makes us rich, even when we don't have money. She was right. And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Phoebe hugged him tighter. I want to help too when I'm old enough. You already do, just by being you. That night, Warren pulled out Kenneth's journal again and reread the final entry. Kenneth's words weren't just instructions. They were a blessing, permission to take everything painful and transform it into purpose. Warren had been saved by kindness. Now he would save others the same way. And somewhere he hoped Kenneth was watching, proud of what was about to begin. 3 months passed in a blur of planning, organizing, and small victories. Warren had never felt so purposeful, so alive. Every morning, he woke up knowing exactly why he was getting out of bed, not just to survive another day, but to build something that mattered. The Kenneth Brennan Second Chance Foundation existed mostly on paper and in their hearts, but it was real, and it was growing. Nora had been promoted to full-time at the grocery store and was saving money toward reinstating her nursing license. Her apartment had become their unofficial headquarters, where Warren and she would meet 3 evenings a week to discuss strategy, identify people who needed help, and plan their next steps. Mrs. Kowalski had gotten involved, bringing wisdom from her years of community volunteer work. Even Gretchen from the diner contributed, keeping an eye out for people who came in looking lost or desperate. Their first real test case presented itself on a cold November morning when Gretchen called Warren at work. "There's a man who's been sitting outside the diner for 3 days, she said quietly. Older, maybe late 40s, clearly homeless. He's not bothering anyone, but Warren, there's something about him that reminds me of you when you first started coming here." Like he's given up. Warren's shift ended at 3. He drove straight to the diner and found the man sitting on the sidewalk near the entrance, his back against the brick wall, a worn duffel bag beside him. He was indeed in his late 40s, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of hard years. What struck Warren most was his posture. Shoulders slumped, head down, the physical manifestation of defeat. Warren sat down beside him on the cold concrete, not saying anything at first. The man glanced over, suspicious, then looked away. "Name's Warren," Warren said after a moment. "I'm not here to move you along or preach at you. I just wanted to sit for a minute, if that's okay." The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Curtis." They sat in silence for several minutes. Warren remembered Kenneth doing this exact thing, just sitting, being present, showing that Curtis was worth someone's time. Finally, Curtis spoke. "You a social worker or something?" "No, just someone who's been where you are. Long time ago, but I remember what it feels like." Curtis laughed bitterly. "Nobody's been where I am. Try me." And slowly, haltingly, Curtis told his story. 20 years in the military, 2 tours in Afghanistan, honorable discharge. He'd come home to find his wife had left and taken their son. The PTSD made it impossible to hold a job. The VA system was overwhelmed, couldn't get him help fast enough. He'd lost his apartment 14 months ago. Been on the streets ever since. His son was 8 years old now, and Curtis hadn't seen him in 3 years. "I'm a ghost," Curtis said quietly. "Already dead, just haven't stopped breathing yet." Warren felt those words in his chest. He'd thought similar things once, sitting on shelter steps, believing his life was over at 25. If Kenneth hadn't intervened. "What if I told you that's not true?" Warren said. "What if I told you there's a path forward, if you're willing to take it?" Curtis looked at him with hollow eyes. "I've heard promises before. This isn't a promise, it's an invitation." Warren pulled out a business card, one of 50 he and Nora had printed at the copy shop, simple white cards with the Kenneth Brennan Second Chance Foundation and both their phone numbers. "My friend and I, we help people who are where you are, not with empty words or religious pamphlets. Real help, practical help, but you have to want it. You have to be willing to fight." Curtis took the card, studying it. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Except eventually, when you're back on your feet, we ask you to help someone else the same way. Pay it forward. Keep the circle going. And if I can't get back on my feet, if I'm too broken?" Warren met his eyes directly. "Then we'll be there anyway. Because that's what people did for me, and that's what we're going to do for you." That evening, Warren called Nora, and they made a plan. Curtis became their focus, their mission, their test of whether Kenneth's dream could actually work. They met with him the next day, both of them this time, and began the slow work of rebuilding a life. The process was harder than Warren had imagined. Curtis was deeply traumatized, prone to anxiety attacks and nightmares. The first time Warren took him to the VA office, Curtis had a panic attack in the parking lot and couldn't go inside. The second time, he made it through the door but left after 10 minutes, overwhelmed. It took 5 visits before Curtis could actually sit through an intake appointment, but Warren and Nora didn't give up. They were there for every setback, every small victory, every moment Curtis wanted to quit. Nora used her medical knowledge to help Curtis navigate the VA healthcare system, advocating for him when he couldn't advocate for himself. Warren took Curtis to AA meetings when his PTSD spiraled, sitting quietly in the back, just being present. Mrs. Kowalski coordinated donations, clothes, toiletries, a sleeping bag, until they could get Curtis into housing. Gretchen made sure Curtis ate breakfast every morning, never charging him. A small community was forming around this one man, proving Kenneth's theory that helping one person could create ripples. The breakthrough came after 6 weeks. The VA approved Curtis for transitional housing, a small studio apartment in a building specifically for veterans. Move-in day was scheduled for the following Saturday, but Curtis seemed more anxious than happy about it. "What if I can't do it?" he asked Warren the night before. "What if I'm too damaged to live like a normal person again?" "You're not damaged," Warren said firmly. "You're wounded. There's a difference. Wounds heal if you give them the chance." "I haven't seen my son in 3 years," Curtis said, his voice breaking. "He was 5 years old last time I held him. Now he's 8. What if he doesn't remember me? What if he doesn't want to see me?" This, Warren realized, was the real fear underneath everything else. Curtis could handle homelessness, could survive PTSD, could endure physical hardship, but the thought of his son rejecting him, that was the wound that wouldn't heal. "Have you tried to contact your ex-wife?" Nora asked gently. "What would I say?" "Sorry I disappeared for 3 years while I lived on the streets. She probably thinks I abandoned them. Or maybe she'll see that you're fighting your way back," Warren said. "Maybe she'll see that you're getting help, getting stable. Maybe that matters more than the time that's passed." Over the next few days, they helped Curtis prepare. They found his ex-wife's contact information. She still lived in the same town, an hour away. Warren helped Curtis write a letter, careful and honest, explaining where he'd been and what he was doing to recover. They mailed it before Curtis could change his mind. The response came faster than expected. Curtis's ex-wife, Patricia, called him directly. Warren was there when Curtis took the call, watching his face cycle through terror, hope, and finally tears. When Curtis hung up, he could barely speak. "She said yes," he whispered. "She'll let me see Tyler. Supervised visit next Sunday at the park." Warren felt his own eyes fill. This was it. This was why they were doing this. Not just to get Curtis off the streets, but to reunite a father with his son, to restore what had been broken, to prove that people could come back from the edge. Move-in day was organized chaos. Warren, Nora, Mrs. Kowalski and Gretchen all showed up to help Curtis move into his new apartment. They'd collected furniture donations, a bed, a small couch, a table and chairs. Nothing fancy, but functional and clean. Phoebe came too, carrying a welcome plant she'd picked out herself. Curtis stood in the middle of his new apartment, surrounded by people who'd become his family, and wept openly. "I don't know how to thank you," he kept saying. "I was ready to die on that street. You gave me my life back. You did the work," Warren said. "We just walked beside you." That evening, after everyone had left and Curtis was settling into his new space, Warren and Nora sat in her apartment, exhausted but elated. "We did it," Nora said quietly. "We actually did it." "We helped someone. One person," Warren agreed. "Kenneth said that's how you change the world, one person at a time." "But Curtis's visit with his son is in 6 days," Nora said, worry creeping into her voice. "What if it doesn't go well? What if Tyler doesn't want to see him? What if all this progress falls apart?" Warren understood her fear. They'd invested so much in Curtis's recovery, become so emotionally connected to his success. If the visit with Tyler went badly, it could destroy everything they'd built. "Then we'll be there to help him through it," Warren said. "That's what this is about, not guaranteeing perfect outcomes, but promising we won't let people face their struggles alone. Nora nodded, but Warren could see she was as nervous as he was. Everything hinged on next Sunday. Curtis's reunion with his son could either cement his recovery or shatter it completely. Warren thought about Kenneth, about the journal entries describing his own fears and doubts about the people he'd helped. Kenneth hadn't always succeeded. He'd lost people, watched them fall back into old patterns, experienced heartbreak when his help wasn't enough. But he'd kept trying anyway, kept believing that the attempt mattered even when the outcome was uncertain. Kenneth would be proud of us, Warren said finally. Not because we're guaranteeing success, but because we're showing up. We're trying. That's all anyone can do. I hope it's enough, Nora whispered. Me too, Warren admitted. Me too. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Warren picked Curtis up at 9, 2 hours before the scheduled meeting at Riverside Park. Curtis had barely slept. The dark circles under his eyes told that story clearly enough. He'd showered, shaved carefully, dressed in the clean clothes Nora had helped him pick out. He looked more nervous than Warren had ever seen him, hands trembling as he climbed into the passenger seat. What if he doesn't recognize me? Curtis asked for the 10th time that morning. 3 years is a lifetime to a kid. What if I'm just a stranger to him now? Then you start rebuilding, Warren said calmly, though his own stomach was tight with anxiety. One moment at a time. That's all any of us can do. They drove to the park in near silence, Curtis staring out the window, lost in thoughts Warren could only imagine. Warren had asked Nora to come as support, and she was already there when they arrived, sitting on a bench near the playground. She stood when she saw them, giving Curtis an encouraging smile. "You look good," she said. "Ready for this?" Curtis laughed without humor. "I've faced enemy fire. I've survived homelessness and addiction and losing everything. But this terrifies me more than any of that." "That's because it matters," Warren said. "The things that scare us most are the things we care about most." They positioned themselves at a picnic table with a clear view of the parking lot. Curtis had his back to the lot. He said he couldn't bear to watch them arrive, so Warren and Nora kept lookout. At exactly 11 o'clock, a blue sedan pulled into the parking space nearest the playground. "They're here," Nora said quietly. Curtis's whole body went rigid. Warren watched as Patricia got out of the driver's side, a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and cautious movements. She opened the back door and a boy emerged. Tyler, 8 years old now, small for his age, with his father's dark hair and his mother's delicate features. He wore a red jacket and looked around uncertainly. Curtis still hadn't turned around. His hands were pressed flat on the picnic table, knuckles white with tension. "Curtis," Warren said gently, "your son is here. You need to look at him." Slowly, as if moving through water, Curtis turned. The moment his eyes found Tyler, everything else seemed to fall away. Warren watched Curtis's face transform, terror giving way to wonder, to love so fierce it was painful to witness. Patricia saw them and began walking toward the picnic area, Tyler's hand firmly in hers. As they got closer, Warren could see the boy's expression, curious, uncertain, maybe a little scared. He didn't run ahead or call out. He stayed close to his mother, watching this stranger who was supposed to be his father. Curtis stood up slowly, and Warren saw him consciously steady himself, push down the anxiety, force himself to be present. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 3 months of work, 6 weeks of intensive help, countless hours of effort and hope and fear, all of it came down to this. "Tyler," Curtis said when they were close enough, his voice rough with emotion. "Hey, buddy." Tyler studied him for a long moment. Patricia gave the boy's hand a gentle squeeze, but said nothing, letting him process at his own pace. Warren held his breath, aware that Nora beside him was doing the same. "Dad?" Tyler's voice was small, uncertain, as if testing out the word to see if it still fit. "Yeah, it's me." Curtis knelt down slowly, bringing himself to Tyler's eye level, opening his arms but not reaching forward, waiting, letting the boy decide. "I've missed you so much." Tyler took one tentative step forward, then another. He was crying now, tears streaming down his small face, and Curtis was crying too, not bothering to hide it. And then Tyler ran the last few steps and threw himself into his father's arms, and Curtis caught him, held him, buried his face in his son's hair and wept. Patricia looked away, wiping at her own eyes. Warren felt Nora grip his hand tightly, both of them watching this reunion neither of them would ever forget. "I thought you were gone forever," Tyler said, his voice muffled against Curtis's chest. "Mom said you were sick, but I thought maybe you didn't want to see me anymore." "Nobody, no." Curtis pulled back just enough to look at his son's face, his hands cradling Tyler's head gently. "I never stopped wanting to see you. Not for 1 second. I was sick, really sick, but I'm getting better now. And I promise you, I'm never going to disappear again." Patricia approached cautiously. "Curtis, you look good, really good. Whatever you've been doing, whatever help you've been getting, keep doing it." Curtis stood, still holding Tyler's hand, and looked at Warren and Nora. "These people saved my life. Warren and Nora, they helped me find my way back." Patricia followed his gaze and nodded at them gratefully. "Thank you," she said simply. "You gave my son his father back." For the next hour, Warren and Nora stayed at a distance while Curtis and Tyler played. They threw a ball back and forth, sat on the swings, walked around the pond feeding ducks with bread Patricia had brought. Tyler's initial hesitation melted away, and soon he was chattering constantly, telling his father about school, about his friends, about everything Curtis had missed. Warren watched Curtis with Tyler and felt something shift inside him, a lightness he hadn't experienced since before Linda died. This was what purpose felt like. Not just surviving, not just getting through the day, but actively making the world better in a tangible, measurable way. One father reunited with one son. It seemed small in the grand scheme of things, but Warren understood now what Kenneth had known all along. Small was enough. "Small was everything. We did this," Nora whispered beside him, her voice full of wonder. "We actually did this." Before Warren could respond, Curtis called out to them, waving them over. Tyler stood beside his father, looking up at these strangers who'd somehow given him back what he thought he'd lost forever. "Tyler," Curtis said, kneeling beside his son again, "I want you to meet the people I told you about. This is Warren and Nora. They're the reason I could come see you today. They're the reason I'm getting better." Tyler looked at Warren seriously, then extended his small hand in a formal handshake that must have been practiced. "Thank you for helping my dad," he said with the earnest sincerity only children possess. "He's the best dad in the world." Warren shook the boy's hand, his throat tight. "You're welcome, Tyler. And you're right, he's pretty great." Tyler turned to Nora and shook her hand too. Then unexpectedly he hugged her legs. Nora's eyes filled with tears as she gently hugged him back. Patricia joined them, and the 5 of them stood in a small circle near the playground. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, and the park was busy with other families, other stories, other lives intersecting in this shared space. "What happens now?" Patricia asked Curtis directly. "This is wonderful seeing you like this. But Tyler needs consistency. He needs to know his father is going to be there." "I understand," Curtis said. "I'm in housing now, in therapy, attending meetings. I've got a part-time job starting next week at a warehouse. It's not much, but it's stable. I want visitation, regular visitation, so Tyler and I can rebuild our relationship properly. Not just today, but every week." Patricia studied him for a long moment. Warren could see her weighing everything, her son's needs, Curtis's history, the risk of believing in change. Finally, she nodded. "Every Sunday. 2 hours, here at the park. We'll see how it goes, and if you stay stable, we can talk about expanding it." Curtis's face broke into a smile so wide it looked like it might split. "Every Sunday. I promise. I'll be here every Sunday." Tyler looked up at his mother. "Really, I get to see Dad every week?" "Yes, sweetheart. Every week." The boy whooped with joy and hugged his father again. Curtis lifted him up, spinning him around the way fathers do, both of them laughing. Warren watched Patricia watching them, and he saw her expression soften. She wanted this to work, too. She wanted her son to have his father back. As Patricia and Tyler prepared to leave, Curtis pulled out his phone. "Can we take a picture?" he asked hesitantly. "All of us together?" I want to remember this day. They arranged themselves by the big oak tree near the playground. Patricia took the photo. Curtis in the center with Tyler on his shoulders, Warren and Nora on either side, all of them smiling. Curtis looked at the photo for a long moment afterward, his eyes shining. "This is going on my wall," he said. "So every morning when I wake up, I remember why I'm fighting, why I can't give up." After Patricia and Tyler left, the three of them sat on a bench, watching the sun sink lower in the sky. Curtis was energized in a way Warren had never seen. Talking rapidly about his plans, the job, therapy, saving money, eventually working toward joint custody. "I want to help," Curtis said suddenly, turning to face Warren and Nora. "Whatever you're building with this foundation, I want to be part of it. I want to help other veterans, other people who've lost their way. You gave me my life back. I need to pass that forward." Warren felt tears prick his eyes. That's exactly what Kenneth hoped for. That the people we help would help others, creating this expanding circle of compassion. "I know 3 veterans right now who are where I was 2 months ago," Curtis continued. "Living on the streets, lost in their trauma, convinced they're beyond saving. I could reach them. I know their language, understand their pain. With your help, I could be for them what you were for me." Nora looked at Warren, and he saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This was the moment Kenneth's vision became real. Not just helping one person, but creating a helper who would help others, who would create more helpers. The ripple effect Kenneth had dreamed about. "Yes," Warren said. "Absolutely yes. You're not just someone we helped, Curtis. You're part of the foundation now. Your family." Curtis pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I wrote something last night. Couldn't sleep, so I wrote down what I wanted to say if I got the chance." He unfolded it carefully, his hands steadier now. "It's a thank you letter. To both of you, and to Kenneth, even though I never met him." He read it aloud, his voice occasionally catching with emotion. The letter described what it felt like to be invisible. To believe your life was over, to exist in a darkness so complete you couldn't remember what light looked like. And then it described what Warren and Nora had done, not just the practical help, but the way they'd seen him as human, believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself, refused to give up even when he wanted to quit. "Kenneth Brennan's legacy lives in you both," Curtis read from his letter. "I will spend the rest of my life passing this forward. Not because I owe you a debt, but because I've learned that healing isn't complete until we help heal others. This is what it means to be human, to be broken, to be helped, to help in turn. Thank you for reminding me I was worth saving." When he finished, none of them could speak for several moments. The sun had set completely now, and the park lights were coming on. Families were heading home, the playground emptying. But Warren, Nora, and Curtis sat together in the gathering darkness, bound by something deeper than friendship, a shared mission, a common purpose, a legacy they'd inherited and would pass forward. "Kenneth knew," Warren said finally. "He knew that saving one person could save dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands eventually. He planted seeds everywhere he went, trusting they'd grow long after he was gone. And we're the proof," Nora added. "We're the garden he planted." Curtis folded his letter carefully and put it back in his pocket. "Then let's make sure this garden keeps growing. Let's make sure his work never ends." They left the park together, 3 people who'd been broken in different ways, now mended and ready to mend others. The Kenneth Brennan Second Chance Foundation had just gained its first volunteer, its first proof that the mission was sustainable, its first evidence that Kenneth's dream could become reality. And somewhere, Warren imagined, Kenneth was watching and smiling. 6 months passed like water flowing downstream, steady, purposeful, transformative. The Kenneth Brennan Second Chance Foundation opened its doors in a small storefront on Main Street, donated by a landlord who'd heard their story and believed in their mission. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms with donated furniture, a coffee maker that was always brewing, and walls painted in warm colors that Phoebe had helped choose. But it was theirs, and it was real. Warren stood outside on opening day, looking at the bronze plaque they'd mounted beside the door. The Kenneth Brennan Second Chance Foundation, where hope begins again, founded by those who received second chances. The morning sun reflected off the polished metal, and Warren felt Kenneth's presence so strongly it was almost physical. Nora joined him, her nursing license reinstatement papers finally approved and framed on the wall inside. She'd been sober for 10 months now, working part-time at the foundation and part-time at a clinic, rebuilding her career one patient at a time. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, Warren admitted. What if nobody comes? What if we can't help them? What if we're not enough? Then we'll learn and try again, Nora said. That's what Kenneth taught us. Showing up matters more than being perfect. Inside, a small crowd had gathered for the opening ceremony. Mrs. Kowalski sat in the front row with members of her church congregation. Gretchen had closed the diner for the afternoon to attend. Curtis stood near the back with Tyler. Patricia had agreed to expanded visitation, and father and son now spent every Sunday together, plus one weekday evening. Phoebe sat with Warren's supervisor from the factory, who'd become unexpectedly supportive once he understood what Warren was building. Warren gave a brief speech, his voice steady despite his nerves. He told Kenneth's story, his own story, Nora's story. He explained that the foundation wasn't about charity. It was about connection, about seeing people's humanity, about believing in second chances because they'd all received them. 6 months ago, I was a struggling single father who could barely feed my daughter, Warren said. A homeless woman walked into my life and called me by a name I'd almost forgotten. That moment changed everything, not because of money or luck, but because a man named Kenneth Brennan believed in second chances before it was fashionable. He helped me 20 years ago without expecting anything in return. He connected his daughter and me in a way that defied coincidence. Today, we honor his memory by doing what he did, seeing people not for who they were, but for who they could become. Nora spoke next, her voice clear and strong. My father died believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Through Warren, through this community, I learned that my father's love never died. It transformed into action. This foundation isn't about us. It's about the next person who walks through that door thinking they're too broken to fix. We're here to prove them wrong. Curtis spoke last, and his words carried the weight of lived experience. 6 months ago, I was sleeping outside a diner, convinced my life was over. These 2 people gave me more than housing or food. They gave me my humanity back. They gave me my son back. I stand here today not as a recipient of charity, but as proof that compassion works. The first client walked in within an hour of opening, a woman named Judith, recently homeless, her eyes carrying the same desperate hope Warren remembered from his own time on the streets. Nora greeted her warmly, offered coffee, made her feel human again. Warren sat with Judith and listened to her story, and it was exactly like Kenneth sitting with him all those years ago. The circle completing itself, the legacy continuing. By evening, they'd helped Judith connect with shelter services, job counseling, and medical resources. More than that, they'd given her hope. As she left, Judith paused at the door. I thought I was invisible, she said quietly. You saw me. After she left, the team sat in exhausted silence. Then Judith's intake form buzzed. She'd already texted asking if she could volunteer once she was stable. The circle continues, Nora said, smiling through tears. That evening, Warren walked Phoebe home through familiar streets. She asked, Dad, are you happy now? Warren considered the question carefully. I'm more than happy, sweetheart. I'm purposeful. There's a difference. Will you always help people? As long as I'm able. Because someone once helped me, and that changed everything. When I grow up, I want to help people too. Warren's heart swelled. You already do, just by being who you are. At home, Warren looked at 2 photos on the mantel. Linda on the left, Kenneth on the right. Between them, a new photo from the foundation opening. Warren, Nora, Curtis, Phoebe, Mrs. Kowalski, Gretchen, all smiling. He whispered to the photos, thank you for everything, for showing me that broken people can heal, and healed people can help others heal. His phone rang. Nora calling. Judith found housing. Starts job training Monday. Warren smiled. Already? That's wonderful. She wants to volunteer once she's stable. The circle continues. Warren tucked Phoebe into bed. She asked for a story. Tell me about Grandpa Kenneth. He told her about the man who saved him, about legacy and kindness, about how one person can change everything. Phoebe fell asleep, smiling. Warren sat in the living room, reflecting on his journey. From homeless to housed, from help to helper, from broken to healed to healer. Kenneth's words echoed. Someday you'll be able to help someone too. That day had arrived, bringing more than Warren imagined. Final thought, thank you, Kenneth, for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing when I couldn't, for bringing Nora into my life, for teaching me that the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's compassion passed forward. Your legacy doesn't end with us, it's just beginning. Every person we help, every life we touch, every second chance we give, it's all because you gave us ours first. Rest well, my friend. Your work continues. Outside his window, the city lights glowed. Somewhere out there, someone was struggling tonight. Tomorrow, they might walk through the foundation doors, and their life would change, as his had, because Kenneth Brennan believed in second chances, and taught others to believe, too. The foundation plaque glowed under the streetlight, Kenneth's name immortalized. But more importantly, his spirit alive in the actions of those he touched. The story doesn't end here. It never really ends. It just keeps rippling outward, one act of kindness at a time, forever.